Welcome back to the show. I am really glad that you are here. This week, I am talking to Jessica Sinarski, who is an author, and she publishes books for kids like ours. And I had the amazing opportunity and privilege to check out her part of her book that is just coming out. And it's, all about emotions and feelings. And y'all, I have to say how in love with this I am for our kiddos. It's so thorough and well thought out, and it uses animals as characters, which I'm a big fan. There's just so many things about what Jessica has created that I am just so in love with. So, Jessica, please tell us more about you, more about your book, your life, whatever you would like to share with us.
Well, thank you, Steph, for having me on. I'm so excited to talk with you and with all of you who are listening right now and just trying to show up for your kids in all of the ways that they need us to show up. I am also a mom. I have 3 boys and sort of live in a home of neurodivergence, which has its awesome, amazing facets. And there are things that are hard and challenging at times for my maybe more neurotypical brain, though I don't know what typical is anymore. It's just, we all have our things. So my background is in mental health. I was a therapist for about, almost 20 years, working a lot with trauma, and really things shifted as I started learning about the brain and attachment and, just what all was going on with some of the big behaviors that I was seeing. And I recognized that I didn't know what I needed to know to be helpful. Here I graduated from grad school and just really was set on a path to keep learning. And as I started to put this brain science in action, that things were shifting for the families I was working with, for the schools that I was supporting. And so over the last 7 years or so, 6 or 7 years, I started doing a lot more writing and creating resources and just trying to translate the neuroscience into action steps. Like, what do I do with all of this that's out there now? That's where I have been living lately. So I still do some clinical supervision, but I spend a lot of my time writing and training and equipping and sort of restoring hope in places that feel very hopeless sometimes.
And I noticed there are a lot of references in your book and in the materials. It seems to be really, I don't know if I can say this correctly, but really accommodating for kiddos who are in foster care or who have been adopted or who are just coming from challenging home situations. And so I thought that was a really cool kind of side adventure almost, because you don't have to have come from those situations in order to benefit from what you've created. But I could definitely see how you are very inclusive of just different experiences that kids may have had with adults in their life. And I thought that was just a really incredible addition to what you've already created.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was those kiddos, those were the kids and families that I spent most of my career working with. And I felt like, just like our neurodivergent kids, a lot of times they feel left out or underrepresented, or their family story isn't told or is told in a way that just keeps driving home shame and blame. And, we don't need that.
Yeah.
We don't need any of that. We get to hold our stories in new ways, in empowering ways, and see the courage of survival. And sometimes that courage of survival is living as a human with ADHD in a world that was not made for that, or, making sense of your senses when your brain and body gets very mixed signals because of how you're wired. And it's easy to focus. It's easier for all of us as adults, I feel like, to focus on the behavior. But I really want to empower us to to see what's underneath and to understand the brain and the body and the memories and, how all of those pieces fit together.
Yeah. And, I think your content really normalizes having a different experience than other kids. That's what I really felt through that, right? It just is what it is. Some of us have different experiences in different families. So I really like just that normalizing aspect of it. And, when we talk about kiddos who are neurodivergent, I've seen a lot of research and a lot of talk lately, specifically about ADHD, that the main things that are typically used to characterize ADHD are not always universal. And I've seen some research that demonstrates that really the one thing that is universal about ADHD is emotional regulation. That's kind of the one thing that's pervasive. And in my experience and my opinion, I think that those of us who are neurodivergent have all the same breadth of emotions, right? We feel all the same things. I feel like we feel them more strongly than neurotypical people. And so it's the same emotion, but for us, it's much stronger. And that runs the gamut of emotions. I mean, even me, if I get really excited about something, it's hard for me to contain myself sometimes. I mean, something happened, I think it was yesterday, and I started kind of stimming, which I'm not
Yeah.
usually a stimmer, but I was so just excited and wrapped up in this situation. And so I think, we sometimes think of anger, frustration, sadness, but it's even the other end of the spectrum that we can just feel. And I wanted to ask you, I know that one of the things that you teach is what feelings really are, and that
Yeah.
there's different components to it. So will you share more about that?
Sure. It was funny as I was writing this book. This is the fourth in the Riley the Brave series, but the first activity book, the first that digs really into putting it all together. And so I was sort of drilling down to what is absolutely necessary to share. And one of the things that I was stuck on for a while is a good definition of feelings, because even though I'd been talking about feelings for years in my practice and, feel like I have good emotional intelligence and all of these things, I was like, what is a feeling? Like, what is an emotion? And so in digging into that even further, what it comes down to is feelings are, so if you're feeling happy, sad, mad, whatever it is, feelings are thoughts plus sensations plus memories. And when I say those three components, we're not even necessarily aware of everything in each of those buckets. So if we think about our thoughts, we may have some conscious thoughts, but we always have this sort of thought stream running in the background that we may or may not have like a solid grasp on. When we think about sensations, it's the same kind of thing. Maybe some of your sensory systems are very loud, some are a little bit muted, and so it's hard to tell what your sensations are telling you, what you're what you're experiencing internally and from your external facing senses. And then that third bucket of memories, I think that's the one that we're learning more and more about, how much of memory is under the surface, that you're going to have loads of memories that you never have conscious thought about, but they still live in your brain and body. And so I think that's the part where helping kids understand all of that, but even helping us as adults understand all those three buckets of information is really important if we're going to help kids make sense of their feelings. And we know that big feelings often lead to big behaviors or shut down behaviors, or, shut down thoughts, like all of those things. So helping tease out all three of those areas is really important. And what I saw my field do a lot, at least in my training early on, is lean way more toward thoughts. Like, you can fix your behavior if you fix your thoughts. And what I saw in practice was that just didn't work for most of the folks I worked with. And I'm not knocking cognitive behavioral therapy. If, if that works well for your brain, great. But I found, particularly related to trauma, I think it's also very true in the world of ADHD, and certainly with autism and other ways that we can be wired, that's just one tiny part of how we function and who we are and what makes us us. And so we do want to pay attention to sensations, all 8 of our senses. We do want to pay attention to maybe what some of those deeper memories are. If your kiddo had a hard time being soothed early on because their senses were a hot mess, or they were still figuring out how to be in the world, and there are some memories there of that time that might pop out in I don't mean unhelpful, surprising ways. And so that's part of where we can be sensitive to some of those little triggers along the way that you might not think would matter because your kid was 3 months old.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that's a really interesting point about how the focus is so much on our thoughts, but there's so many things that contribute to our thoughts, right? I mean, and our memories are your memories dictate the filter that you see the world through.
Yes, very much so.
You can have the same situation happen simultaneously to 2 different people, and you're most likely going to get a different response from both of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's because there's so many things that contribute to the way that we think. So I really love that you are taking that to another level, because I definitely agree with that. And it's hard to challenge our thoughts when they are tied to our sensations, our memories, different things. It's hard to do, like you said, the traditional cognitive behavioral therapy of this is a logical and rational thought based on my history, or
Yes. I love what you just said, because I have trauma in my history and went through some cognitive behavioral types of therapy, and just trying to stop the thought or argue with the thought was never very effective for me. And what I came to learn further into my healing journey, I don't think we're ever like gold star, you're healed. But wherever I am right now, on that path, I feel like one of the things I've really learned to embrace is honoring the courage of survival, honoring the reasons that I talk a lot about downstairs and upstairs brain, like Dan Siegel's house model of the brain. The reasons that my sort of primal brain kicks into, you're a failure, that's never going to work. What's wrong with you? My downstairs brain gets very aggressive toward me. Well, it was part of how I figured out how to survive. And so I can berate myself for berating myself, or I can say, all right, little protector, I see you in there trying to make sure I don't fall on my face, or trying to make sure my needs are met, or trying to make sure that I don't make myself too big or too loud, and get hurt, try not to express my needs because maybe my needs don't get to be met. Or be myself, don't be too much because the world is not ready for your too muchness. That if I can say, hey, I see you trying to protect me, brain and body, and it's okay, I can bring my 42-year-old self to this problem and all of my safe people around me, and know that I can find my way through. So I hear you being loud, and I get it, and we're okay, right?
Yeah. Right before we're recording this, I was a guest on a show, and it was about some trauma that I had as a young adult. And part of it was I had a person in my life that made me very physically unsafe. And I can't even think of the feeling of not knowing, the paranoia that I developed from that was extreme. And I, even to this day, have a really extreme startle reflex. But that's all really logical. It was logical for me to be so paranoid about this person, right? And it's logical that I now have this startle reflex. It doesn't serve me anymore. But just asking, kind of those cognitive questions, yeah, it it was. And like you said, sometimes some of these things are the things that save us, and they're the things
Yes.
that keep us from getting in that situation again next time. And I've heard kids who or people who've been through trauma, which is most of us, I would have to say, are skills that we develop, skills of observation, right? Skills of like your intuition, you learning to pay attention to things, are the things that keep us from getting in a situation like that again.
Yeah. I just love how you framed it, where it was adaptive. You needed that sort of startle reflex or being on guard all the time. And it's not serving you well right now. Both can be true. I feel like so much of my work is about holding both. So for our kids with ADHD or our autistic kids, that we can hold both, that they are amazing and have these unique skills and gifts and talents, and that emotion regulation is really hard. And maybe you're grieving a little bit because family vacation doesn't look like you thought it would, or you're not posting the same things on Facebook that your friends are posting about for your teenagers, or like that. We can hold both. We can celebrate and we can mourn. And when we get to do that together, I think that's what I love sometimes about the podcast community, is that there's a sense of, I am not alone. I am not alone in this. My kid had an epic meltdown, and I am just patting myself on the back for not flipping my lid right along with them, or for being able to repair, even though I flipped my lid right along with them. And we're back at it. I think that's living. You never arrive, just like you never arrive at healing. You never arrive at being a perfect parent. You never arrive at, managing the way you're wired perfectly. It's just all about, how do we feel and deal? How do we navigate life and equip our kiddos to do the same? That's the journey.
Yeah. And I really relate to what you were just saying about when you gave the example of someone that did maybe have a reaction to their kiddo having meltdown. One of the things that's really important to me with my students is it's always okay to feel the way that we feel, right?
Yeah.
It's always okay, however we feel. And it's okay if we have big reactions, it's always okay. The goal is just, how do we recover from that?
Yeah.
Right? How do we move forward? How do we reset? How do we recover? How do we repair? Maybe if that's something that needs to happen. But I think that's I'm remembering maybe 2 weeks ago when one of my students had a challenging situation, and it was just that happens, right? All that really matters to me is that by the time we were done, he had reset. We were able to move forward.
That's right.
So yeah, just holding space for it's always okay,
Yep.
I also, one of the things I wanted to mention about your creations is, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but anytime you create a course, a product, and anything, you have to put the criteria around it. You have to kind of narrow your audience, right? And so maybe there's, like even for my program, it's for neurodivergent kids, right? And there's got to be some parameters on it. And so your resources are marketed towards kids who are 5 to 10, right? And one of the things that I've noticed with my students is a few years ago, before I had created my own curriculum, I used a lot of books by 2 particular authors because they were so well written, and they also were pretty similar market, right? Kids 5 to 10. And what I noticed is that all of my students were totally engrossed when I would read these books to them. My 16-year-old students, my 20-year-old students, they were all really engaged, and we would have really good conversations. And so that to me is all the credit to you guys that are creating these resources and materials, because you're creating things that, while you have to pick a market, they are
Yes.
applicable to everybody. And so I want to share that about your resources as well, that even, you know, for everybody who's listening, even if your kiddo is older than 10, it does not mean that they are too old for these conversations or these resources or these discussions. I actually have found that to not be true with the students that I'm working with. And I think that's such a testament to you for creating them that way, that they're not too simplistic or too immature for kids who are older.
I appreciate you calling that out. It's one of the things I want to say a love-hate relationship with marketing, but mostly it's a frustration of mine. It's a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but it is not my favorite part of being an entrepreneur. That is for darn sure. So we have to put ages on books. And I know that first of all, every human is different. And so what might appeal to this 10-year-old is different than what might appeal to that 20-year-old is, like, I know there's just tremendous diversity of thought and interest. And then the other piece is, I think the power of a good story can transcend age. And so that is what I've tried to weave into how I write, that certainly I'm thinking of younger kids with the Riley the Brave series, or Your Magic Backpack series. I'm thinking about that upper elementary age kid, but the feedback that I've heard from many people is exactly what you're saying, that, oh, my teenager was reading over my shoulder as we were doing X, Y, or Z, or I used this in my group of teens to talk about, such and such. I think so much comes back to sometimes adult discomfort. So our ability to say, all right, guys, I know it's a dopey picture book, but hang with me here because I think there's some bigger themes here. So you have my full permission, get any of my books and you can say, I know, guys, it's just a silly picture book, but hang with me. Because really, so I've certainly had young kids who've gotten lots out of these resources, but some of my favorite stories have come from teens and adults who have had really profound experiences of feeling seen. And that is my favorite part of being an author, is being able to help share stories in a way that is strengths-based, not preachy, not too adult of language, that just lets you go into that story part of your brain and put yourself in the story. And that's really my goal, whatever the age of the kid.
And, another thing that is one of the characteristics of what you've created is that the characters in your stories are animals. So while to some people that may not seem relevant, when we are trying to help our kiddos understand something that's personal, like, obviously, if you're using these resources with your kiddo, it's because they're struggling with emotional regulation, right? I mean,
Sure.
that would be why we would be using it. And so our kiddos can tend to get put off and defensive when they feel like something is specifically about them. And so that's part of the beauty of the power of books, is that a book is never about you, right? It's about the character.
Right.
But excuse me, I also find that when we use non-human characters, it helps our kiddos remove themselves a little bit more from the situation. And so it becomes even less personal, and they are more likely to be interested and engaged. And so
Yeah.
I really like that about what you've created as well, is that you're using animals as the characters. And so it just makes it a little less personal to the kids. You know,
Yeah.
it's almost like they are rooting for the character, right? And so you're able to not make it about them, but they will be able to make that connection themselves without someone
Yes.
directly saying, this is about you, right?
It's so much safer to approach. And I think that's true for us as adults too. No one wants to be told, like, hey, work on your anger, right? Like that doesn't feel good. Get your you know what together. Like, no, thank you. That I do not feel seen or heard or valued in that situation. And so I think in the Riley series and in a couple of the books that are coming soon, I've put these big downstairs brain moments, these big emotional outbursts, maybe, or shut down sort of that fight, flight, freeze, feign death sort of reactions into animal terms, partly because that's like we can feel it. These are primal feelings. And so putting it in sort of a primal language works for my brain better than like colors or things that even using the feelings words, you know, maybe you have a really concrete thinker that's better for them and that's great. But a lot of the kids that I've worked with struggle to put words to feelings, and the animal characters, you know, having a tiger moment or having a turtle moment or a porcupine moment, we can feel what that feels like. You know, if I talk about having a porcupine moment, I can feel the spikes sort of on my back. I can feel my grumpy furrowed brow, right? If I think about having a turtle moment, I had one yesterday. I was just telling my colleague, I sort of found myself sitting under my desk at one point in the day, as one does, you know, like it happens. And I had to take my deep breaths and sort of ask myself, what am I afraid of right now? What danger signals are coming in that I'm detecting that are feeling like overwhelm? How can I, what's my next wise step? We can feel what it feels like to have a turtle moment or a tiger moment. And for a lot of our kids, especially that struggle with emotion regulation, that feels so, even though we're talking about animals, it's somehow more humanizing than you have rage issues. Or like I had a first grader who was saying that to me in school. Like we had read Riley the Brave. I had read Riley the Brave with his school. And he came up to me afterwards and was like, I really liked that, and said I swear he used the words rage issues. And I was like, no first grader should know the words rage issues, right? Like this is a kid who's clearly struggling, and yet it's turning into a label on him of something that's wrong with him. But this little guy has a lot of tiger moments, and what is that tiger protecting? What's going on underneath that tiger feels like it needs to roar really loud. That's what I want to help that kid be curious about, and also help the adults around, teachers, counselors, parents, be curious about.
Yeah, I really love that point. And I know that your resources include a wide range of emotions. And I want to tell you why I'm such a fan of that. Previously in my life, I worked in a pre-K setting. And one of the things that I noticed is that the emotions that they focused on were mad, sad, and happy. Mad, sad, and happy. And so those are kind of the three base emotion, base meaning like primary, right? But here's what I know about mad. I don't believe there's such a thing as mad. I have learned, and I believe that mad is a secondary emotion and it's a masking emotion. So typically if we're feeling mad, angry, whatever, we're really feeling frustrated, disappointed, unsafe, right? Out of control. And then mad is almost a more socially acceptable emotion than any of those other emotions. And so even if you think about, my classic example is driving and somebody swerves in front of you and cuts you off, and we tend to respond out of anger, but really that's fear, right? And that's feeling unsafe. I've had several, I live in Texas, and there's just weird stuff here. I mean, there's a lot of huge vehicles here, and a lot of people who drive huge vehicles and kind of take advantage of that, and kind of, think they own the road around here. I mean, I
Sure.
have people try to drive me off the road, and I'm a conscientious, safe driver. You get in that fear, right? Of like, in a traffic situation, your life is at risk, right? If something happens in a traffic situation. So this is kind of turning into a ramble, but my point being, I'm not a fan of MAD being used as like a go-to example for emotions for kids, because I think it completely overlooks all the emotions that are underneath that. And so I noticed, you have loved as an emotion, right? I mean, you have all kinds of emotions, because mad, sad, happy just does not cut it.
That's
And I
right.
think happy is a secondary emotion too. I think, why do you feel happy? You feel proud, you feel loved, you feel excited. I think these ones that we tend to default to as the main emotions are actually not. So that was my ramble
That's
about that.
yes. So I really like the point that you're making with MAD in particular, that so often, so it's funny that you say that. One of my books in a different series is called Hello Anger, and it's using this backpack metaphor where we have heavy things in our backpack, maybe they're big feelings or difficult life experiences, and whenever anger comes out of our backpack, there's always other books underneath, right? There's always, whether it's frustration or feeling different or left out or stressed or outraged at injustice, or like, anger is a powerfully protective emotion. Anger is such a powerful and protective emotion. And so it's part of why I get frustrated with anger management that is just about shutting down anger, just about being calm. Like, if you think, so listener with me, or you, Steph, if you think about when you're really mad about something, if I say, as I feel like I was trained to in college, well, let's just sit down and let's have a conversation. No, you don't get my pain. Like, you don't understand how outrageous it is that X, Y, and Z just happened, or that person just ran me off the road, or, this person at school isn't getting it with my kid, or, all of these big danger signals that are coming in and hurting me. And if I feel like you're not, I'm going off a little bit on a tangent here, but this is part of why I think we have to honor anger and what it's telling us in ourselves and in others. That doesn't mean be a doormat. That doesn't mean angry behavior that gets dangerous to self or others is acceptable. That is not what I'm talking about. But I want us to get to know our tiger inside, because it probably served a purpose. It absolutely has served a purpose. It is not wrong to feel angry. It is telling you something. So if we can turn toward our anger or our fear or our anxiety or our happiness and see, like, say hello to it. Like, what else, what are you telling me? What is this feeling communicating? What are my thoughts, sensations, and memories all wrapping up to say? Sometimes it might be that, you need a hot bath and some time to chill out. Sometimes it's that you're not feeling seen in a certain relationship and you're having to mask or change yourself to be accepted. And that's bringing up some anger or hurt or fear on top of the anger, right? So the more that we can befriend our emotions, as opposed to squashing them, the better the better life is in general, because that's how we find our way through. It's not by turning away or saying, oh, I shouldn't feel that. You feel it for a reason. Let's figure out what the reason is, and on we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Anger is a protective emotion, right?
Yeah.
Anger comes about when we feel like we are not safe, or, anger. I've heard it said that anger inspires action, right? When we're
Mm-hmm.
angry, it's because something needs to happen.
Right.
It could be, that we need to change a circumstance or situation. It could be that we need help. It could be that we need to leave.
That's right.
Anger inspires action, whereas most other emotions don't have that same drive behind them.
Yeah.
It's like anger is a signal to us that something needs to change, or that we're not safe. So yeah, I'm really glad that you said that about just the kind of the damage that can be done when we talk about anger. As none of the emotions are negative or bad,
Yes.
they just are.
Yes.
And they all serve a purpose.
That's right.
And so one of the things that I tell my students is it's always okay to feel the way you feel.
That's
We
right.
just have to be mindful of the choices that we make when we feel that way.
That's
right. But it's always okay to feel the way that you feel. And I'm thinking of maybe last week, I was working with a student who got really upset about something. And I just started doing a lot of self-talk. I got a bit upset at the situation that caused him to feel upset.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did is I just started doing a lot of out loud self-talk, because I didn't want to seem like I was telling him what to do. But I just started talking through my own strategies. And so I was saying, I really have learned to take deep breaths and have your out breath longer than your in breath. I said, when I feel really frustrated or upset, sometimes I just need to take a nap. I said, sometimes I go for a walk. Sometimes I grab my kitty cat and snuggle. So I'm just talking out loud to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he, is kind of de-escalating as I'm talking to him. But his frustration and his anger was completely valid. I mean,
exactly.
Like the situation that was happening, I was getting frustrated because I couldn't control the situation that was happening that was causing him to be frustrated and angry.
That's right.
So I at no point was I trying to talk him down from being angry. But one of the things I did say was, as I'm talking out loud to myself, I said, sometimes when I'm feeling a big emotion, I will ask myself if I want to continue feeling this way. And a lot of times the answer is no, right? This doesn't feel good. I don't want to continue feeling this way. And so then it's up to me to figure out, what can I do about it, right? What can I do differently so that I don't keep feeling this way? And so that's kind of where I took the conversation. But yeah, I think and he actually came around pretty quickly and easily. But I think, in a previous episode, we were talking about just the need to validate other people's feelings, right? It's always okay to feel the way that you feel. And there's a reason that you feel the way. I am not a fan of the concept of overreacting, because I don't think that's a thing. I think we all react based on what you were saying earlier, our sensations, our memories, right? The filter that we see the world through. So somebody may say something that doesn't have any effect on 99 other people, but to you, it has a significant effect. Or you may see something that other people don't even notice, but to you, it reminds you of something, that's happened before. So I'm not a fan of the term overreaction. I actually don't think there is such a thing. I think we're all reacting based on what's coming into our world.
Yeah. That makes me think of two different directions. One is, in a similar way, I don't love the term maladaptive, because so often something has been adaptive. It may not be serving me well right now, but if we're calling it maladaptive, we're missing the adaptive part of it. And the whole like overreacting or underreacting, I think, it's part of why I struggle with the concept of there's a big thing in the like mental health and counseling world of right sizing the problem, like helping kids right size the problem. Well, if this is a kid who for them having a scratchy shirt or, the clicking noise or the whatever is sending them into a tiger moment, then it's a tiger-sized problem for them. And do we
right.
need to figure out what supports and strategies and skills they can have in place to move through that? Sure, absolutely. But I think I think it feels dismissive to say, well, we need to right size that problem. Just like none of us like it when somebody's like, well, you'll be fine tomorrow. Like, I know you're stressed today, but you'll be fine in a week. Okay. That may be true, but that does not help me
Not
feel
helpful.
safe and
Yeah.
seen and valued, that my
Yeah.
experience matters in this moment. So if I am asking for some cheerleading and like, remind me I got this, yeah, maybe then that makes sense. But in general, when we're having big feelings, the very first step is to not feel alone with that feeling. That co-regulation, right? We need somebody else to be to help us feel and deal before we can get very good at feeling and dealing on our own, which sometimes involves knowing that we need someone else's help to feel and deal, right? Like it's not like we ever arrive at a place where we never need somebody else's help emotionally. And that's what I've tried to infuse in my work, that I think so much of the time I feel like teachers and school counselors are in a really crummy position because they're trying to co-regulate 25, 30, 300 kids at once. And that's sort of setting them up for failure, which puts them in a position where they really do have to ask that the kids manage it on their own. And we know, as parents of kids who aren't always able to manage it on their own, that might be setting kids up for failure, and then more shame and more blame and more tiger moments, and round we go.
Mhm.
So we want to break that cycle and help normalize and depersonalize and help kids learn to be the boss of their brains, because they really can. None of this means like your downstairs brain gets to run the show from now on. It's both, and it's exactly what you were sort of modeling for the kiddo last week, that I'm having big feels and just going to let my breath go out. You know what, guys, I might need to walk this off for just a second. I don't want to roar at you. Right.
Mhm.
And, maybe it's not the animal language that you use, but whatever it is that you're modeling, that exactly what we're trying to teach.
And normalizing it.
Yeah.
I'm also feeling frustrated. I'm also feeling annoyed, and sometimes I'll
100%.
even say that to kids. You know what? If that happened to me, I would feel the same way. Like I'll use
Yeah.
language like that a lot too, just to normalize the way that kids are feeling. Man,
Yeah.
I would be annoyed if that happened to me too.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's interesting how that one sentence really can break like the emotional tension,
Yes.
that one sentence. I will often see kids like physically kind of deflate a little bit, it's just been
I feel like for parents who are maybe like, I don't see how they could be, like, it's a green sippy cup instead of a blue sippy cup. And I don't get why this is such a big deal in this moment. I hear you. I've certainly been there as a parent as well, where I don't have the empathy for it. And so I think even an additional tool in your toolbox can be maybe something like, I can see how that's frustrating, or, ooh, this was really hard, right? Like just acknowledging what you're seeing happening. Oh, that was really upsetting. Ooh, you know, that even just that, even if you can't feel it with them yourself, that's okay. But normalizing, acknowledging their experience, whether you find it normal, quote unquote, or not,
right.
it's what's happening. And the more that we can turn toward what is, the more that we can find our way through, instead of stuffing and masking and hiding and or raging
Yeah.
and losing it.
Yeah, I think a great example. I'm actually pretty good with change and newness and things being different. But sometimes when I notice my kids are struggling with that, because you're right, I don't really relate to that, but I will say something like, man, doing things different can be really hard sometimes.
Yes, great example.
Right? Or
yep.
man, when it's time to, when game time is over, that can be really when we have to stop
Yes,
doing
that's
something
exactly
that we
right.
to do, that can be really frustrating.
Yep.
And then we just move on, right?
Yep. So
Yeah, being
powerful.
told that, being expected to do something we didn't want to do, man, that can be really, really
Yes.
frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah. So powerful.
Jessica, thank you so much for being here with me today. This was such an amazing conversation about a really, really important topic that I think a lot of us as functional adults don't always know how to have conversations like this. Don't always know how to support our kids, with things like this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for creating all the amazing resources that you have created. Thank you for what you do in the world.
Thank you.
Before we go, if you will please tell everybody where they can find you on the interwebs.
Absolutely. So for parents, the best place to go is jessicasinarski.com, SINARSKI. And you can find lots of free resources, blog posts, downloadables, as well as my shop that has books and posters and games and just things to help keep all of these things in mind and help you and the kids in your life. You can also find my books wherever books are sold. If you just Google search my last name, Sinarski, on Amazon or bookshop.org or wherever you buy your books, that is where you'll find a whole list of what's available. And my hope is to come alongside you with these big, tough things. And so I'm just honored to have the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everybody who's listening. I am really glad that you are here, and I'll see you again next week.